Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Millicent Walker. This week, inspectors of the UN nuclear watchdog are going to 2 Ukrainian sites at Kyiv's request. Their goal, to detect any possible undeclared nuclear activities and material. This is in reaction to Russian claims that Ukraine could deploy a so-called dirty bomb, something Ukraine denies. We have a report, and the chairman of the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission sheds more light on the kind of bombs and their implications. We also speak on Nigeria's nuclear capacity.
Thank you very much.
It all began on October 25 when Russia took its accusation that Ukraine was preparing to use a dirty bomb, an explosive device laced with radioactive material, to the United Nations Security Council, voicing its concerns during a closed-door meeting of the 15-member body. It alleged that Kyiv has ordered 2 organizations to create a dirty bomb.
The agency should be vigilant, as well as Security Council members should be sending strong messages to Ukraine to prevent such a scenario.
Ukraine has the capacity. Ukraine has all the reasons to do so, because we know that Zelensky regime wants to avoid, first of all, defeat. Secondly, wants to involve NATO for direct clash with Russia, which is very dangerous, and but which will be profitable for Zelensky regime to remain in power.
It was an accusation rejected by the West.
This is transparently false allegations we're hearing from the Russian Federation. Ukraine has been clear, it's got nothing to hide. IAEA inspectors are on the way. And we should be clear, this is pure Russian misinformation of the kind we've seen many times before, and it should stop.
President Putin's nuclear rhetoric is dangerous, and it is reckless and irresponsible.
When asked what evidence Russia had to back its claims, Mr. Polyansky told reporters that it was intelligence information that had been shared with Western counterparts with the necessary level of clearance. But while Russia's Putin has ruled out using nuclear weapons in Ukraine, describing the conflict there as part of alleged efforts by the West to secure its global domination, October 26th, Russia rehearsed its response to a nuclear attack in an exercise involving nuclear submarines, strategic bombers and ballistic missiles. So, what is this dirty bomb, and what role would it play in what Russia calls a special military operation in Ukraine? My guest is the chairman of the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. What is a dirty bomb, and how does it work?
Well, thank you, Millicent. I think this is a question that many people have been asking us in the nuclear industry. You see, the uranium atom, when you bombard it with a neutron or particle, is split into 2 or more atoms, and then also with the release of more neutrons. Now, this is what we call fission chain reaction. So the 2 neutrons again will bombard another atom, and then 3 to 4 more neutrons again, and then the reaction continues like that. Now, the rate of birth of the neutrons will continue to grow unless you control it. If you did not control it, it will reach a population that is devastating. So in a fission chain reaction, if it is a controlled fission chain reaction, you will have what we call a reactor. And that reactor, you can now control the number of neutrons coming into the system in such a way that you can direct them to do what you want to do. But if you allow the fission chain reaction to go uncontrolled, then it becomes a dirty bomb.
It's probably still a little scientific. Break that down
Yeah.
in line with the back and forth and the worry that seems to be coming from the international community on, this dirty bomb.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes. So generally, if I can come to a layman status, if you have a dirty bomb, is a bomb that uses nuclear material that emits radiation and also emit immense heat that can be able to destroy the environment, and then there is residual radiation that can also contaminate the environment. So it is a bomb that not only create a fire to destroy the environment, the facilities that it is dropped on, but associated with it is a radioactive material that can contaminate the air, the land, the sea, or wherever it is being dropped.
So there's a lot of damage that could occur if this is used in the war.
Yes, exactly, exactly. There is a lot of damage associated with any bomb that is dropped anywhere. There are three damages. One, you can destroy the target, which might be land, sea, or air. You can destroy the target by creating heat energy that can burn down the whole target. Two, you can create radiation in the environment that whosoever that inhales the radiation, it can go in to change the genetic and the cells composition of that target. The third one is you can deposit some contaminated radioactive materials that can contaminate both the fauna and flora. That means both the plants, the environment, and the animals that are there, which can cause skin diseases, burns, and also may lead to stochastic or somatic effects like cancer, whether in future, whether immediately.
So if we look at the issue of radioactive waste, with the kind of nuclear capacity that countries have, for example, Ukraine, what happens when a waste site is hit? Can it withstand missiles as much as some can withstand a plane crash?
Yeah, exactly. This is a very much concern. You see, all the stories that happens about the Zaporizhia reactors, that the largest reactor in Europe, that there are missiles firing around that environment, and the consequences that may happen. You see, the challenge is that in every power reactor, there are materials stored there. Two type of materials. The irradiated material, which we call the fuel elements of the reactor, which has been spent, they are kept there for them to decay. And there are new fresh ones, which have not gone into the reactor. They are also kept there as spares that they can be utilized. So apart from the core of the reactor, which is also having a lot of the fuel elements. So any of these radioactive waste, which is the utilized fuel elements, if they are heat, which they are normally stored in a pool, if they are heat, they can now discharge their materials from the cladding, which is the content that is holding them together. If they release those materials, then again, contamination, as I've said earlier, can come in. Also, if you heat the core of the reactor, then melting will occur. And with the melting, then that means the material will be released to the environment, just like the case of the Chernobyl accident that you have had before. Then the other one is that even the fresh fuel elements, they are potential materials that can contaminate the environment if they are heat. So we try to avoid that. But in an ordinary situation also, there are systems of cooling, both secondary and primary loops that cools the reactors as they are operational or as they are standing by. And if you touch any of the cooling or safety systems, then the reactor safety will be jeopardized. And again, radioactive materials will be released to the environment. So I think both back and forth, whatever that people are talking about, we are running away from a situation whereby you can be able to attack a storage facility. And if that storage facility have radioactive materials there, then those radioactive materials will be released to the environment. And no one knows. It depends on the quantity, the volume, and the environmental conditions like the wind and other things that happens around the facility that can now lead whether the radioactive contamination can go far or can be contained in a small space.
Professor, to date, when we look at the African continent, South Africa appears to be the only country that has a nuclear power plant. What are the barriers to Nigeria's nuclear capacity?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is good that you have asked this question. In the whole of African region, there are many countries that have shown interest in trying to see that they have nuclear in their own energy mix. Now, let me take you down the length of history why you can understand that in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal have already shown interest and are working with international community to acquire power plants so that they can put nuclear energy into their mix. In the East and South Africa, we have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, and Namibia, apart from South Africa. In the North, you have Egypt, Libya, Sudan, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. All of these countries are in one stage of their developing nuclear infrastructure or the other. For instance, in Nigeria, we have already taken the 19 issues in our nuclear infrastructure that has to do with safety, management, security, radioactive waste, human capital development, government taking decisions, and so on and so on. They're up to 19. And these 19 are the ones that will now push you into the milestones. There are three major milestones in the IAEA documents that a country must achieve before it will have its nuclear power plants in place. Milestone one has to do with the decision of the government to go to have the nuclear power plants and also to train the human capital. And then this milestone two has to do with the 19 infrastructure issues that I've started listing before, that you must achieve all of them and put them in place. But the milestone three has to do with construction stage. So
Where
what
are
we
we?
have done now, yeah, so we have achieved milestone one and two already. We are at the verge of doing feasibility studies, which have to do with business plan to show the viability and the economic prospects, and also to determine the key investors and the shareholding. And once we complete that in the country, then you can start seeing us signing contractual agreement with the vendors. Well, we have to open bid, and then the vendors will do that. Then will be selected, and then we now sign contractual agreement with the vendors, and then we now start constructing.
If you can tell us, the Ministerial Conference on Nuclear Power is taking place in Washington. What role is
Yes.
Nigeria playing? What's our statement?
Yeah, thank you very much. We have shown to the international community during the 21st nuclear power 21st century nuclear power conference, where they want to emphasize the role that the nuclear powers can do in trying to move to cleaner energies and in also trying to safeguard the environment. We have demonstrated to them how far we have gone in Nigeria in our nuclear power roadmap, and some of the infrastructural framework that we have put in place, from the legislative framework to human capital development to other infrastructural framework. We have also demonstrated to them that Nigeria, as a leading country in Africa, is considering putting nuclear power as part of its energy mix. I want to confess to you that there is no country that wants to have their own sustainability and stability of energy without having this nuclear power. The reason is that for you to have a base load energy for your industries and heavy duty machines, there is only one or two options. One, you can get it with hydro. Two, you can get it with nuclear. Three, you can get it with gas. But the problem of gas-fired power stations is the sustainability of the supply of the gas, and also the security of the pipelines that takes gas to you, or whatever means of transportation of the gas. So we know this in Nigeria. Well, we have gas, we have hydro, but the renewable energies, if you look at it from the dimension of base load energy, these are energies that can be put into the grid to give you what we call peak load. Peak load is to sustain the system, but not to provide the much energy that are required for heavy duty industrial and machineries that we can run our industrial setup.
Welcome back. My next guest speaks about China's relations with the world. Ambassador, thank you for joining me. I mean, Mr. Xi leads the world's second largest economy and one of its biggest military forces. Some analysts say that he's likely to push China towards a more authoritarian political stance in a third five-year term. Do you agree?
I don't agree at all. First of all, I wouldn't even like to use the word more authoritarian because that presupposes that the government or the authority or the president or whatever in China is already authoritarian, you know, but the improvement in its economy and military power will now make it more authoritarian. I have lived in China. There is nothing I saw that is authoritarian about the Chinese regime. I think these are media propaganda. I'm sorry to say so, but that's the reality. I, as a person, used to think so. Before I was sent to China to serve the country, you know, I was apprehensive. I was very apprehensive of the place I was going to based on the information I had of China, just as many people do have now. But all that changed in less than 1 month of my arrival there. And it is still the case. I witnessed it all. And I'm sorry that as far as I know, that the Chinese government or the party is not authoritarian. And in fact, acquisition of more or greater military power and greater improvement in its economy, I don't think will make it more authoritarian. Yes, they may use such powers to achieve their foreign policy objectives, but certainly not for authoritarian reasons.
What do you think will be China's future direction, particularly on the key challenges, economic, political, diplomatic, and even environmental?
Well, China, like every country, has its own challenges. But the difference between China and some countries, in fact, if I may say so, most countries, is that its economic fundamentals puts it in such a stead that it will be able to manage its challenges. And China is very good in turning adversities into opportunities.
China's economy boomed in recent decades. I mean, definitely, you know, the factor there. But we're hearing that it's facing serious economic disruptions, and this is from its, you know, COVID lockdowns. There's also, of course, what's affecting the global community, the rising prices. So, you know, some analysts are of the opinion that economic growth under President Xi is lower than under previous presidents.
Interestingly, it's now 30 years since I arrived in China and then lived there for the number of years I lived there and have since then followed developments in that country. Of course, for every country, there are all these ups and downs, just as is the case in China. Now, but one thing has been constant in China. The plan, there is that strategy for economic development that builds into the planning system possibilities of, if you like, one thing or the other not going right, so that it does not shake the system so much. They absorb it and still are in a position to achieve their objectives or achieve their targets. Let me tell you why I said so. In 1980, China made an arrangement, or rather, decided that it was going to quadruple its GDP of 1980 by the year 2000. You know, of course, its growth rate was not the same over that 20-year period. But do you know that eventually China achieved that target 5 years ahead of the time? That is in 1995. I was there. I was in China at that time. And then for the remaining 5 years, they now did another development plan. You get a point. You know, right now, you know, yes, there are predictions. China had problems arising from COVID. You know, in fact, there's zero tolerance for COVID, which more than any other country, actually, China has made the greatest progress. In fact, achieved the greatest success in controlling COVID. Now, let me even tell you the latest objective China has, or rather strategy they have mapped out, that China plans to double its GDP of 2020, that's GDP of 20 years ago, in the year 2035, that is 13 years from now. Based on my experience of China's previous targets, I expect that China will achieve it possibly ahead of time. More importantly, China, during these past 10 years, pulled out 100 million people, 100 million of its citizens from absolute poverty. You know, the only country that has been able to achieve it.
What do you make of China's body language when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Well, it's not body language. China has stated its position on that crisis very clearly. You know, China believes that a threat was posed to Russia, and Russia reacted to the threat that was posed to it. That is the position of China.
Some have said President Xi, has favored, hardline approach to relations with the West, particularly over Taiwan. How do you see that playing out since President Xi insists reunification by 2049 and then its relationship with the West?
China's preference for unification with Taiwan is by peaceful means. And China is most likely to achieve it, is working on it, and has been making tremendous progress.
But let's not forget, it said that, it hasn't said it would not use force. In fact,
it's an option.
We understand
it's an option, yes. Like I said earlier, that option has always been there. You know, in actual fact, China's position is that if Taiwan declares independence, China will invade Taiwan. There is that consensus they had in 1992. Neither China nor Taiwan had broken that consensus. Taiwan knows the position of China. That's why it has never declared independence, But at the same time, China is using economic means to bring Taiwan close to it. In fact, it's the means they are using to reunify the two sides. I wouldn't call them to two countries because Taiwan is not a country. So, I said earlier, I said something earlier about Taiwan's investment because China used the Fujian province that is very close to Taiwan as a special economic zone. And Taiwan poured $194 billion of investment there in 4,500 Chinese companies. And then its trade, volume of trade with China accounts for 32% of its global trade volume, making it even more dependent on China. And all these are as at today. In the next 10 years, the dependency will continue. In the next 20 years, the same. So it might not even reach, or rather, and even the 1949 China mentioned, it wasn't that definite.
That's
because
the
China knows
2049.
that before 2049, sorry.
I want to sneak this in, and this is, how you would define China's relationship with Africa, especially Nigeria.
Well, Nigeria's or Africa's relationship with China, first of all, I would say that both Africa and Nigeria, of course, as part of Africa, enjoy good relations with China. But I must tell you, I'm not quite comfortable with the dependency syndrome among African countries, including Nigeria, in their relationship or relations with China, because there is so much for Africa to learn from China. Whether we like it or not, China is the future. China will eventually dominate global economy. And it is for Africa at this stage of its development to key into China's progress.
Ambassador Chuka Udedibia, one-time Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy, Beijing, China. That's the Nigerian Embassy, Beijing, China. Thank you so much for talking to us. On that note, we've come to the end of the program this week. If you missed any part of it, you can always play back on our youtube.com/channelsweb. I'm Millicent Walker. Thank you for watching.